Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the first of many sessions in this theatre today. Welcome to Ecom Expo 24. It's nice to see you all made an early effort to get here, which is always much appreciated from the organisers and the panellists, who are always a little bit nervous being the first one out the trap in the morning. But a couple of points for you to start with. Can you please make sure your mobile phones are on silent? And can I also ask to make sure that you take everything out with you that you brought in with you? And I believe at the end of each session as well, we need you to leave so that we can get the next group of people in to make it a bit fair for everybody else. Excellent. Well, thank you very much also to Intuit MailChimp for supporting this theatre throughout the 2 days. I hope you're going to join us for both days because the agenda's quite full and we've got a lot to talk about. And on the subject of which, I'd like to introduce Paul from Econsultancy, who's got quite an interesting and topical conversation for the current economic climate. So, Paul, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrew. So, very, very warm welcome. Good morning, everybody. This is fantastic. This is an Ecom Expo. It's now in its 18th year, which I didn't realise. So it's been going a long, long time. We're really delighted to be able to kick it off with you. My name is Paul Davies. As Andrew said, I'm the managing partner for Econsultancy. So we're a learning capability consultancy. That's how we fit into the e-commerce kind of ecosystem. But I know that in the audience, we've got a very broad church of people. We've got consultancies, agencies, tech providers, fulfillment agencies, media owners, etc., etc. So we're going to cover a lot of ground. We're going to have hopefully a very interesting conversation. We're going to go through 3 things. The first thing we're going to go through is the major trends. I mean, we've all witnessed the rise and rise of e-commerce, but we're going to kind of take the lid off and look into some of the trends and the counter trends that sit beneath it. We're then going to move into capabilities, and we're going to look at what are those critical skills and capabilities that organizations and teams, individuals need in order to shape and leverage those trends. And then finally, we're going to look at what are the learning strategies that companies take to build and acquire and evolve those capabilities. So there is a lot to get through. We don't have that much time, and I am determined to leave a few minutes at the end for questions to our illustrious panel. So as we're going through, just have a think about some interesting questions that you'd like to pose to the panel at the end. So I think let's just crack on then. So we have got a fantastic panel to answer some of these questions to you today. I'll let them introduce themselves more fully, but just to give you a sense, we've got Mark from Unilever, one of the world's leading CPG organizations, that's famed for its e-commerce capability. We've got Tilda from Sky, one of the leading entertainment businesses in the world. And we've got Ollie from Boots UK. And I think Boots UK really just personifies how much change is going through the business model because of e-commerce, because they're not only online retailers, they are media owners and they're branded manufacturers as well. So really some interesting insights from different kind of sectors. So let's get into it. All right, I'm going to sit down now, so do excuse me. Right, so we're going to start off with kind of some of the key trends. And Ollie, we're going to start with you. I mean, e-commerce has just been growing at a tremendous rate. I think it's about 29% of all UK retail sales now go through online. But underneath that, there's a very different picture. So, for example, only 9% of UK retail grocery is bought online versus 29% for fashion. So lots of different trends and kind of different sectors at different maturity levels. What's your take on what are the big trends that you're seeing online?
Yeah, sure. So good morning. Really lovely to see you. I'm Ollie Scher. I'm the Omni Media Director of Boots. So I look after all of Boots' media, and I also run our retail media group. So my team looks after all of our performance marketing. I think from an online perspective, there's a couple of things that I pull out. I think it has seen massive expansion, obviously post-COVID. One of the things that we're seeing a lot is also the thoughts about how consumers are shopping and browsing online, but then also buying in store. So I think this omni-channel impact is becoming greater and greater, and we've spent quite a bit of time understanding that effectiveness from it. I think probably the second thing I touched on is the way in which consumers are kind of buying now. I think is much more considered. I know there's a lot of discussion about cost of living, And actually what we're seeing is the kind of purchase journey is actually extended quite a bit. So that middle part where customers are really deciding where they're going to buy has got a lot longer. And being able to know when you can interact with that and how you should interact with that has become really important. And that probably links to my last point, which is probably social commerce, which we've seen a huge rise of, which is the way in which customers are using social media either for purchase direct or alternatively as a way of finding products and brands that they're then able to purchase on site.
Okay, so some really interesting and big and different trends going on there. Tilda, kind of what's your kind of take on it from a different industry entirely?
Very different industry, but somewhat similar experience. So during the pandemic, customers got used to shopping online. We saw a tenfold increase in people paying online. And that was a big breakthrough. And since then, customer expectations have been rising. So it has to be easy, it has to be quick, and it has to be relevant. And if I think about Sky, we have on the one hand entertainment, where shows that I'm willing to pay for is a key driver of purchase, and surfacing those relevant shows that speak to me personally rather than to the nation at large is really key. And how do we make sense of it? How do we bring it to the front is a question we're asking. On the other hand, in terms of broadband, that's more of on the utility side. So it's, am I getting the speed in my postcode, and is it the right price? So it's very, very competitive. But again, it needs to speak to me, my need now, my renewal of contract now. So that's a key theme. How do we understand our customers online much, much better and in detail, and how do we make it easy for them?
And how do you do that, Tilda, where you've got, on the one hand, you're talking about entertainment, it's big, glossy, high production value. The motivation there is different to, I need a broadband provider, it's got to have so many bits per second, and I need it at this cost per month. How do you deal with that through an online lens?
Well, I feel it has been quite separate, like running two separate businesses. But the trends we're seeing now is that things are starting to move closer, and streaming is a key driver of that, right? You need fast internet to be able to stream the content you like, especially in sports, where it should be live now. So more and more we're thinking about our offering as a one Sky.
Okay, interesting.
It's
Mark,
a journey.
what's your spin from Unilever's perspective?
It's really interesting here what Jolly has been talking about, the shift of customer dynamics, and we saw that ourselves. So I sit over the omnichannel strategy at Unilever, and we see that shift of shopper behavior, particularly from COVID, kind of coming back to the everyday norm, that physical stores are just as important as the virtual ones. So the idea for us and the focus of how can we use the online environment to properly inform the in-store experience and drive conversion. For us, we talk about that as research online purchase anywhere. It's really critical to what we see across different markets and different customers as well. It means our response to them needs to be really considered and thought through about all the touch points on the digital journey. So whichever way that shoppers interact with our end customers, whether it's Walmart in the US or Tesco here in the UK, we need to be sure that there's real consistency around the right information, the right product detail, the right pricing information coming through the retailer, and ensuring that at the point of need, availability is absolutely in place. And it means then ultimately that those shopper needs are properly well executed, no matter where they encounter where they want to buy.
So I want to deep dive now into value. So, cost of living, I saw a recent Ipsos poll which said inflation, affordability, cost of living, call it what you will, it's the #1 concern for consumers globally, and it has been for the last 30 months. So just let that sink in. For the last 30 months, the most important thing is inflation. So value is clearly really critical. So how do you connote value through an online perspective? I'll start with you, Ollie.
Yeah, I think customers' perception of value, initially our initial thought is it has to be price driven. And actually I think consumer value is driven in many different ways. It could be about the type of value that they want. So from a Boots perspective, do I want instantaneous reward that I might get? through pricing, or do I want reward longer term through things like Advantage card points? But equally also, I think, because they're really considered in their purchase, it's also the types of products that are available, the sizing of those products that are available, and where and how easy is it for me to get that product. So I think we initially always think about value in that traditional sense that it has to be price. And don't get me wrong, it is an incredibly competitive marketplace out there. Yeah. So I think you have to be right with regards to pricing. But I think there's a wider perspective around it. And I think some of the data we're seeing now is that consumers' own perception of their personal economic situation is improving. I think it's the wider economy that's still driving some concerns. And I think that, but comparatively to where we were 12 months ago, I think that has evolved a lot.
Okay,
we were.
So some green shoots then in terms of individual behaviour, but not yet reflected in the kind of the broader macro environment.
Definitely.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think just to add to that, the other value dynamics about value for time. And we see that a lot, again, on our global basis, where the needs for today, trying to serve those in a physical store environment, or for us when it comes to online quick commerce style, is really key. So there's that trade-off between what's the value of the product on the shelf versus I need it in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And we see that dynamic in different markets in different ways. I mean, a great example is, say, what Walmart is doing in the US on drone delivery. You know, you wouldn't expect it to be a big thing, but they're testing it at scale across Dallas at the minute, where delivering within 10, 15 minutes is absolutely central to their offer. So the speed of getting in hands of customers and the trade-off on price is becoming more and more prevalent.
So value is being delivered through these other drivers other than price, which clearly means that people must be able to afford to value other value drivers.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Tilda, I would agree with that. And GfK Consumer Research quoted that UK, more than any other European country, places the highest importance on innovation. So value is not just price, as you said, Ollie, but the value for money. Does this product, does this price offering make my life easier? And so we see that the customers are ready to shop at a higher price if it offers them an intangible benefit as well, like being the first one to get hold on the new iPhone that's being released, or being the first one to get into the gaming at a faster speed, or watch the latest shows in my context, obviously. Being able to demonstrate that value, that money can't buy experience and service that comes with the product is really key.
Okay, so I think there's some sense of optimism there. For it's not a race to the bottom. Things are not just chosen on price, and if you can find competitive advantage, things that consumers value, you can charge, a more premium pricing. So I'm going to switch gears now. So we've looked at some of the trends, not all of the trends by any means, but I want to now turn to the skills and capabilities that organizations like yours need in order to respond to and shape and leverage these trends that we've just talked about. And, I've got to confess, we've got a dog in the fight here at Econsultancy. We're a learning capability business, and we work with these fantastic companies to develop capability programs. And kind of what I've observed, especially in the e-commerce space, is that changing capabilities is as much about the mindsets and the softer skills as it is about the technical skills, because oftentimes you're sat between the sales and the marketing function, and you've got to enroll people, so there's lots of softer skills. So, Tilda, I'll start with you. Kind of what's your sense of these critical skills, capabilities that organizations need, and are they evolving?
Thank you. I'm very passionate about this subject and how we continuously learn in our professional career. There's so much going on, so many demands from all sides of business, customers, stakeholders, everybody. So what are the key three? I wanted to narrow it down for me. First one is around making sense of data and insight. It's not about generating the report. It's about how quickly can we get hold of the relevant data and make sense of it, turn it into an actionable insight. And that space is really disrupted with machine learning, with augmented reality, with AI models. Data is everywhere. It comes in volumes that are sometimes overwhelming. and it's about how fast can we make sense of it. That's probably the most critical one. The second one is stemming out of the data, personalization. How can we drive relevance to our customers? Because they, as much as we are bombarded with messages, omni-channel, offline, online, from competitors entering into adjacent spaces more and more. So how do we show relevant offering to them? Even more so with social media now. The next generation attention span is really shrinking. We see it's gone down by 7 minutes, so we have that much shorter time to make a point. And finally, third one, I mentioned about it before, it's customer experience. Being really obsessed with the digital customer experience and touch points that we provide to our customers, so their comprehension is high, it's easy, and if possible, fun, so that they enjoy coming back and looking for more.
Okay, so speed, data, and kind of this overarching CX are the critical things. What about you, Mark? I know kind of this is really a big part of your role at Unilever.
It is, and I love what you said about relevance, because for us, there's so many teams that contribute to delivering on e-commerce and omni-channel, whether it's in the central brand teams all the way to the markets, and trying to steer the relevant skills to the right group of people in different ways means you almost have to cut the experience up. So our brand owners and our category strategy planning teams might have a different need to understand the capabilities required to deliver, or the nuances of the channel. And that's very different from those at the very sharp end of things in the day-to-day. And subject experts like ourselves are trying to build that capability. So I think the relevance is absolutely critical. Different types of messages, different types of understanding is key. And I think ensuring that each knows the role that they play to the overall picture of things. So they might only have a small contribution, R&D, for example, on packaging, might have a really important input on the physical shelf and the virtual shelf for us. If they understand their role and how that contributes to the end of shopper needs being met, then the joined up nature of that fragmented journey is brought together internally so we can be our best externally.
Okay, interesting. So you're thinking about e-commerce very holistically here in terms of how each different team kind of contributes to that seamless experience to the shopper.
Yeah,
very good.
much.
Ollie, how does it work at Boots?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me there's two parts. One is around, you talked about the softer skills. I think we've touched on it. I think the big one for me is about the type of resource that we have in the talent and having people who have a naturally curious nature. We probably have one of the most evolving industries. It's constantly changing. I mean, we think we've touched on it a bit already this morning. And I think we're having the right type of people who want to constantly understand how that's evolving, how they can utilize the tools that are now available in the market, whether that's Gen AI, whether that's greater data literacy. I think it's such a critical part for success for us. And I suppose the other side of it, as one I'm personally obsessed with, is about velocity. So when we do things like A/B testing, the more you can do, the better chance you have of success. So if you assume that 1 out of 10 tests will be successful, if you do 100 tests, you've got a far greater chance of success than if you do 5. So I think it's about bringing that ability to give the teams both the tools and the training and the right to test and learn really fast so that they can then make the ability to have competitive advantage, which is what it will give you.
Okay, just to pick on that a bit more then. So, and have you noticed, are these kind of ongoing skills? How do you keep up with the pace of change? Are these evergreen skills, or do you feel that new things are emerging, or is there a mix of both?
I think there's constantly, from the hard skills perspective, it's constantly evolving. I mean, I touched at the beginning on something like social commerce. I mean, if you look at it, TikTok's really only been in the market, say, 3 years. So 3 years ago, it wasn't here. So I think how you utilize that channel, how you can make use of it from a commerce perspective, means you need to learn that. But actually, the hard skills of what you need to do with that channel are similar to the other e-commerce channels that you may have.
Okay.
It's just about learning how you can use that channel in a different way to maybe the ones you've got.
Yeah.
How does it work for your customer, and how is it complementary? But I think the curiosity part is the critical part, because it has to be that person that goes, this is what my customer's doing, why are they doing that, and then how do I understand how I can use that to make better use and bring that into my toolbox going forward.
Okay, so this sort of transversal and then there's some platform-specific skills as
100%.
well. I mean, Mark, how does that work at Unilever? You're operating in 4 or 5 big categories. You're in every country in the world. How do you determine it's TikTok, it's this platform, it's that marketplace? How do you kind of scan the market and determine what's important?
There's always going to be these emerging channels that come out at pace, and we struggle naturally, like everybody does, on trying to get to grips with what's the relevance to shoppers, and then in turn, how do we need to respond to it?
Yeah.
And what it often comes down to is us as a central team. We've got a central center of excellence that tries to interpret the long-term impacts of these scenarios, like social commerce, very much so TikTok now and TikTok Shop. How does that going to impact that shopper experience? And then what do we need to do to support our retail customers and enable that through? And then after that, it's trying to figure out, again, what's the relevancy of these to the core roles that are already delivering on the shopper experience and embedding that in their everyday thinking. There's the technical skills and competencies that you kind of evolve as you go, but there's always a constant. As Ollie's saying, there's always going to be a constant understanding of shopper need and the role of product and great product and portfolio. Meeting those and then refining the edges to flex for the new opportunity or the new social media outlet then means you're constantly focused on that end goal of shopper need and delivering on what they're doing.
So that's the North Star, the shopper need, and then you're working back with that. And Tilda, Sky, very fast-moving business. Every time I'm ever in contact, I'm always amazed at how quickly it goes. How do you kind of keep up to date with the latest trends?
So I agree with some of the points you both brought, and to add to the curiosity and the customer relevance, I feel the only way we can keep up is to make growth and learning part of the day-to-day job. So last year we introduced OKRs in Sky. It's a framework for objectives and key results that we want to achieve as a business. And part of that is that it stems from the business strategy. So what's the top priorities for our CEO? How does that then translate into the different leadership levels, and how does it come to the individual in their personal objectives? And I try and encourage my team to always think about the what and the how, so that learning is part of the day-to-day job. While I'm delivering this commercial target, am I learning and innovating how to make the digital experience smoother or easier, or how I improve my analytical skills while delivering a better conversion rate, for example. And in this way, I hope people can enjoy learning as part of their job, not as something extra they have to do out of hours. And to make it furthermore more practical, partners can add a lot of value. We learn a lot from our partners. One, because they can give us a benchmark of where we are in the industry, but two, because they have a specialism and a know-how. For example, we use Content Square, and I love watching the frustration index. It's a rating that they give, and they actually can show you the session of the customer experience. You can see how customers are scrolling down and not understanding it and going back up and trying to click on something that's not clickable. And for me, that's amazing, because we can talk about failure. We can talk about failed experiments, and that makes it okay to learn and test and think about, how do I make this differently? How do I make it better? You don't have to be right all of the time. We're all in uncharted territory, so that's a key skill to add to the curiosity and how we think about things that didn't work and what we do with them next.
Very good. So I think that, again, the softer skills, just reinforcing that curiosity and inquisitiveness is not a hard skill, but it's critical in this space. I want to zoom in a little bit on retail media, because this is something, certainly, Ollie and Mark, in your sectors that, again, has happened very, very quickly and has become so important now. Starting with you, Ollie, kind of how important has retail media come to Boots, both, I guess, in sense of what your marketers, how your marketers use the channel, but then as a retail media operator working with other companies?
Yeah, I think it's been very well documented and publicized, the growth of retail media over the last few years. I think what it gives us is two things. Is we haven't had the technology previously to be able to take large volumes of kind of loyalty card data and make it usable for either ourselves or suppliers to activate that. And I think that's what this technology is now there that enables us to do that, to understand the effectiveness of it, both in an online and offline way. And I think what that provides then is infrastructure to really do. I was an FMCG advertiser for like 9 years, and always my challenge was I launched my campaigns, I got to a point, and then I really wanted to know what was happening underneath it, but I had to wait for the econometrics or for other sources to get the results. What happens now is that you don't need to wait. You actually can create a full funnel activation using retailer data, so you can see what the effect of your upper funnel activity is on conversion over a longer period. And because you're talking about people-based data rather than cookie-based data, you can look at that over a much longer period. So if your purchase cycle is 3 months for your product, you can understand how your advertising affects in the short term and the medium term and the long term. So I think what it gives us is a great level of understanding, better than we've ever had before, of what our customers are doing.
Yeah.
But it's also providing our brand partners with the ability to activate across the shopper journey. And I think back to what we were touching on earlier, really looking at what are you looking to deliver for the shopper, and therefore how can I activate? So it's giving you touch points, it's giving you activation, and it's giving you measurement. So that's why I think it is having such a significant growth at the moment.
So Mark, as one of those brand partners, I'd be fascinated to understand a little peek into the mind of Unilever. Is it a massive opportunity? Is it affecting the way you think about longer-term brand building? How are you approaching it as an organization?
I think that the media networks are really powerful and super evolving. And actually, I think even Very announced a new model sort of yesterday on that. So clearly it's a massive space for both retailers and for us as advertisers and partners there. What's great about them is the ability for the attribution modeling. With it being closed loop, and you've got the physical store and the digital store environment coming together. And for me, playing to this research online purchase anywhere dynamic, you can't ask for a better understanding. What's really great is it really supports that on-site discovery bit, which we all want to do. We want to drive shoppers to the right products in the portfolio, and then drive the conversion. And being able to do that on-site in a really structured and set up way is hugely appealing. So it's something we're watching and putting ourselves into heavily across, globally.
Yeah, fantastic. Right, okay. This is a wide-ranging conversation, as we said. I'm going to move into the third area now, which is, I think, is possibly the most overlooked, which is we've looked at the big trends, we've looked at the capabilities and how they're evolving, and now the million-dollar question is, how do you acquire those capabilities? How do you embed those capabilities? How do you evolve those capabilities, right? And that's the hard bit. It's much easier to focus kind of further up the funnel, but then actually how do you make it stick on the ground? And again, we work with a lot of clients like yourselves, and what I observe is it's bloody hard. It's really hard because you're trying to ask people to unlearn what they've already known. Perhaps they've been very successful in their career based on a set of capabilities. You're now saying, that's less important, you need to focus on something very different. I'm asking you to be a bit vulnerable, try and learn new things, and that's hard. So you really need to drive engagement, take people along the journey with you so that they're part of the change rather than it being done to them. So I'd like to really pick into this now. Mark, big organization, gazillion kind of employees all over the world. It's a super tanker. What are the sort of learning strategies you involve to build those new capabilities at Unilever?
It's been an interesting journey, I think, the last 24, 36 months for us, because what we try to do as an organization is build a baseline of understanding across the business. We've worked with Econsultancy on an accelerator program around digital commerce, e-commerce, our accelerator program. I had multiple tiers from basic to expert. Thankfully, I passed that assessment, which is a relief. But what we tried to do was bring the baseline skills of everybody across the organization up to a suitable standard. What we found is that's very time-consuming. It takes a lot of effort from the individual teams to free up several hours to go through these multiple stages of learning, as valuable as it is. So what we've looked at more recently, the last 12, 18 months, is how can we be very specific with those at the really sharp edge of the business, our key account managers in particular. So what we've done on that in the last 12 months especially is come up with a very different program. So instead of really structured, organized, linear path of learning, we've been much more agile about it. So we've come up with what we call our CAM toolkit, our Key Account Manager toolkit approach, which is really novel for us because it's video-led. It's very interactive, very digitally engaging. It's run by some people from the US who are, you can imagine, super excitable. So the content comes across in a set of 12 different topic areas that are absolutely core to the delivery of the channel. What's great about that is not only is the video content encapsulated, it can be done in any order. So there's no linearity around it. And importantly, the content is supported by cheat sheets. Now, this is really key for us, for our account managers, because it means that they could go into a meeting with a key customer like Boots or Walmart or Carrefour, and 30 minutes before upskill themselves on one of those key topics that might come up in those meetings. So it could be visibility on a digital shelf or the role of retail media. And it means it gives them enough to be capable and competent, is the way I'll describe it, before those sessions, so they can go and be impactful, come away with the right actions and support our customers as they go. And that, the feedback from that on a very targeted group of people, sort of 2,000 people rather than 30 or 40,000, has been remarkable because it's just served as they need rather than we need as an organization, so the adoption rate is much, much higher.
Right, so that's sort of learning at the point of need rather than having to go and do something that's very heavy and a heavy lift, what you need, when you need it, being able to ask those right questions.
Yeah, very much.
Fantastic. Ollie, let's go back to you. How does it work at Boots? Again, a big legacy organisation, been around for a long, long time, lots of different teams. How do you raise the kind of the organisation and team capabilities in e-commerce?
Yeah, I mean, I think the core part, and we touched on some of it earlier, is I think you have to give people the time to learn. So I think it has to be part of what they're able to do. I think for two reasons. One is, if you recruit people who are naturally curious, if you want that as part of your organisation, those people need to be given the time to allow them to kind of spend time to understand what is out there, what should I be doing, how can I test and learn. I think the other part is really understanding what they need from a learning perspective. Some people want very structured learning, like classroom-based. Some people just want to have access to ChatGPT and the ability to build, GPTs that allow them to do their work faster. And I think it's understanding each of your individuals with really clear development programs that allow that to happen. But I also think the last part is probably the cultural piece, which is we've spent a lot of time, we've done a lot of work on in-housing, and actually the type of culture that you want to create is a learning-based culture where they have the right to do everything we've talked about. They have the ability to be successful and to learn and fail fast. They have access to whatever resources they might need, whether that's through partners, whether that's through our kind of relationship with people such as yourselves, and creating bespoke, almost learning capabilities for each of them.
Yeah.
Because actually that's what they want to understand what their development process will be for the future. So I think a large part of my role is really thinking about how do we develop the team that will be the right team, not just for today, but actually for the next kind of 2 to 3 years.
So, because we've worked with some interesting clients who have actually said, right, Wednesday afternoons is the time you're gonna have a 2-hour slot to learn, or Friday afternoon you're gonna have 10 minutes with a cuppa to read this, do that, whatever. And because the insight behind that is that actually people are so busy, and there's always something that's more urgent, if not more important to do than learn new capabilities. And I think that's just a human nature. How do you give permission for learners to try new things, experiment, so it's not just words, but actually they feel empowered to do that?
Yeah, completely. I mean, I can't claim it. I stole it from Google. They've always worked in the 80-20 principle, which is you focus, to your point, 80% of your energy on the jobs that you do all the time, and you have to have 20% of your role that is focused on projects that are pushing the organisation forward. And I think our big focus is for our team members is to really identify what is the 20% for them. Because the other challenge is that my team laugh, but I always say that the 20% is like a giant buffet. Like you could eat anything. It literally is so much opportunity out there, and actually really spending time with them, with their line managers, to understand what are the things that, was it soft skills, hard skills, what are the things they need in there to help them grow is the really important part, because that allows them to then test and create, so they can create GPTs in that 20% that then will become part of the 80% in the future.
Okay, so you're helping guide them through the buffet.
100%.
A curated buffet.
Curated buffet, it's my favourite thing.
Eat as much as you can. Tilda, how does it work at Sky? How do you get that kind of cultural piece working?
Well, the muscle memory is strong. This is an excellent business who's done decades of offline selling really, really well. So we need to work on different levels. One of them is educating stakeholders, and that is probably an art more than a science. It depends very much on personal approaches and preferences. But what I found is that going slowly works better. So understanding the business and the priorities of that stakeholder and using, in my case, digital to help those priorities. And it could be a small change, a small incremental contribution to their P&L that matters to them, that then opens the door to curiosity of how did you do it, what worked, how did digital succeed in this versus other routes to market. That is a long game. At the same time, the more junior teams, they're excited about the innovation, about what's new and different. And so the question for me is, how do I juggle between the two? And for my team, I find that gamifying learning is
Okay, good.
is fun, is good. So a recent example is they told me they did not want PowerPoint slide, they did not want sitting in front of a speaker. So we did a game. We buddied up with the retail organization, and we did a retail game where we went to Westfield, and they had a number of topics that they had to discover in our retail store across competitors. And there was a bit of resistance in the beginning. They thought, well, these are really open questions. Who will score whether the answers are right or wrong? And I had to say, trust me on that. I'll score them, don't worry. And we went for the game. We spent a day there. Whereas in the beginning they thought, this is going to be too long. At the end, we all ran out of time. And I didn't even get to the scoring because the feedback I got was, well, everybody has a different look on the same thing. There were so many ideas coming up. So we've been chewing on that one day for a couple of weeks, thinking what we could learn from retail, what could we learn from the offline, and then where are we better? Because it's good to have some winning points and to feel you're doing it better than others. So that sort of conversation then triggered self-learning, and I loved it. I'm thinking how to replicate it in the next quarter.
Love that idea. A day at Westfield, not normally something that would fill my heart with joy, but I like the sound of that. I mean, Mark, Unilever's quite an extreme example because it's such a big organisation, but everyone sitting in here will have layers of people that they manage and people they report into. But in a kind of matrix organisation, how do you build alignment around a programme?
It's incredibly difficult, unsurprisingly, because each part of the business has its own requirements, whether it's L&D or whether it's research and development teams or customer-facing ones. Again, that singular focus is serving the needs of our customers and our shoppers, ultimately. And if we're not meeting those needs, we're going to fail as a business. So that alignment is really key, a singular focus. I think then the adaptability around it, and then bringing that group of stakeholders in a way that meets those individual needs. So the core message, adapting it to the relevant teams, whether it is the commercial colleagues, how does this going to have relevance to your role and you achieving your results and meeting these needs is really key. And having a really clear vision, ultimately. I think we've talked about this in the past, having a clear vision for what we want to achieve, and that expressly delivered at all levels of the business from leadership down, makes it easier for everybody to align against something, and then find different ways and more agile ways to kind of come together and deliver it.
Fantastic. Right, I did promise that we would leave some time for audience questions, because I think I could carry on asking questions for a long, long time. We've got about 5 minutes. We have got people from these amazing organisations. We've got a roving mic, one or two. If we could have a roving mic to the front, please. If you could just say, what's your name, where you come from, when you ask your question.
My name is Anna Hardiman. You were talking earlier on quite a lot about data and curiosity. So that's the mix of kind of hard skills and soft skills. And I think Tilda gave a great example earlier on of actually watching the customer go through the experience to understand like why metrics might be moving in a certain direction. I'm interested to know what you're doing with your own teams to make sure that when they're looking at a problem, they're looking at both qualitative and quantitative data to get the full picture.
Great question. Who wants to have a swing at that one? You've stumped them.
I can get started. I think it depends very much on the team in my world. Designers and creatives and merchandisers, they tend to be looking at the qualitatives. They would come and tell me what learnings they've generated, and the sample is 100 users. So we need to take it with a pinch of salt. On the other hand, performance teams and data science teams, they will go and look at the quantitative and come back with analysis that can be sometimes only focused on the data, but we can't relate it to the visuals or the actual campaign that drove that level of conversion or click-through. So I guess I'm trying to bring them together in the same room and let them collaborate and build on each other's expertise.
We're a business that gets swamped in data. You can imagine from so many different sources. And what we try and do is ensure that the teams, as they're using our information, backs it up with speaking with shoppers, speaking with customers, but also going on their own journey. So one of the most powerful tools we kind of have inside is a really simple tool of walking the store. So you'll do it in the physical retail environment. You'll get out and see what the physical shelf looks like. We encourage it from a digital perspective. So you go online, you go on a mission, you experience the problems and friction, and you apply that experience, the kind of pain point stuff back into the data. And it brings some relevance in sort of human side to the information and the stats that you have to work with.
I think we've got an absolute abundance of quantitative data, both in customer data, performance data. I think what we've worked really hard on is what's the goal that we're using it for. So particularly in things like measurement, there's a difference between what has driven a performance, so what's driven a ROI, and then why. And I think what we focused on is how do we understand the tools that we need that give us the what. So what gives us the measurement to give us what we're doing, but then also why has that happened? Is it creativity? Is it consumer perception change? And then equally also, how do those things link together? Because otherwise what you end up with is lots of data and lots of metrics, and then none of them come together. And what we've worked on is what are the key metrics that actually link to from like why it's happened into what it's happened. So, does consideration really drive, if you're seeing that move, does that really drive return on investment? So those are the kind of work that we've been doing. But it's a big thing, and I think sometimes we get, to Mark's point, we have so much data, we get lost in it. So, but really knowing what you're looking for, I think, is the really key part of it.
Fab question, thank you. Any more questions for our illustrious panel? Any hands up? Don't be shy. There's one over there. Hello, sir.
Hi, Tom from Spotler. You mentioned personalization in the sort of user buying journey. Maybe a question for you, Oliver. In terms of boots, where do you find is the highest conversion from a personalization on site?
Cool, I mean, that's I don't know if I can give you the direct answer, Tom, but I think, so what I would answer is the following, is I think there's a really fine balance on personalization. So probably if you go back a couple of years, everyone really believed that you needed to develop a one-for-one personalization. I think what we think we've all discovered is that that's not always relevant. And actually there you can develop quite clear cohorts of customers. So you can go what I call like a one-to-some rather than a one-to-many. So, there's definitely channels we use which are one-to-many, and we're using data now more for sort of one-to-some. So you've got scale against it, because the other challenge we find is if you go one-to-one, the actual commercial return that you can deliver on a one-to-one is quite limited, because you have to be guaranteed that that person's going to convert every time with the data you're driving. So I think probably that would be my thoughts. Our big thing is really thinking about what is it we're trying to do in that moment, and also where does that customer sit in their conversion journey at that time before we make the decision about which of those buckets we put them in.
Right, fabulous. I think we are literally going to run out of time. So it just beholds me to say, first of all, thank you guys for coming along and asking questions and listening to us. But a massive thank you to the fabulous panel, for Mark, Tilda and Ollie for sharing your time and your expertise. Thank you very much, guys. And enjoy the rest of your 2 days at eCommerce Expo. Thank you.
Thank you.